Thanks for inviting me to come to this group. I was not familiar with RATPAC. I've become a lot more familiar with it by doing some background reading. You guys are a very interesting group, and I'm honored to be here tonight to talk to you about a trip that I took. Um, and hopefully we can have a little dialogue about it as well. Um, one of the nice things about Zoom, as you probably know by now, is that you can cover a lot of material in a short period of time because you guys can read the slides as well as I can show them. So cover a little bit more than I normally would, maybe a little faster pace, but hope to be able to give you a sense of what it was like to go on this trip. Just a little background about me. I got my novice license back in 1958. I'm originally from upstate New York. I got my novice in 58 and a year later, my general. And then I fell in love, of course, with the SX99 and the Heathkit DX40, that and a long wire, and you could work the world back then. You guys might remember those days. After college, I moved out to California, which is where I am now, and kind of dropped in and out of the hobby for a while to do the normal thing, raising a family, making a living and so forth. And about 2000, got back into the to this hobby with a lot more energy, and had upgraded by then to my current call sign. I got involved in several clubs and organizations, so provided some leadership, past president and current director of the Northern California DX Foundation, past president of the Northern California Contest Club, and a few other things that you can see there. One of my favorite modes is CW, and I was one of the founding members of CW Ops. You may have heard of that organization. Back in 2009, we formalized it. I'm ID number 11. Currently, there are over 3,000 members, so it's been an amazing growth for that organization. I certainly enjoy chasing the rare DX when it's out there. I enjoy contesting and certainly participating in these DXpeditions, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, for anyone who's tuning in tonight and you're not quite sure what a DXpedition is, I put together a fairly simple definition. It's a long distance trip organized by ham radio operators to an exotic place. And the place is typically an island or a country or sometimes a specific geographical grid. And the reason it's exotic is because it's usually remote or because there aren't very many ham radio operators that are active from that place. Why do we bother doing it? Well, there's the challenge of operating station remotely and often in an inhospitable region. We enjoy helping others get the contact in the log, especially if you're working toward an award, and it's a lot of fun. The first organized DXpedition, as far as I can tell, was in 1947, and that was Thor Heyerdahl, the Kon-Tiki expedition, where he traveled from Peru to Polynesia to prove that South America could have populated some of the islands out that way. Call sign he used was LI2B. That's the QSL card, and you can read more about it if you Google it. It's a fascinating trip that he took. So maybe to start out with, we can get oriented about where Palmyra is, in case you haven't been looking at a map of the Pacific lately. So it's 1,000 miles southwest of Hawaii, and it's very close to another DXCC entity called Kingman Reef, about 35 miles away from Kingman. It sits 350 miles above the equator, so you can start to guess what the climate might be like. You can also see some of the surrounding islands out there that are always sought after islands for DXCC credit. Places like Jarvis and Howland and Baker and Wake and Johnston Atoll. And I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with these, may have even been there, visited some of them in the past. If you take a look at a polar map of this area, it's pretty obvious looking at this map that Palmyra is pretty far away from any major city. Most people think it's in the middle of nowhere. And in fact, it's considered to be about as far away from humanity as you can get. If you want to take a look at this aerial view. It's kind of an interesting view of the island. It actually is not an island, it's an atoll. And the reason it's an atoll is because it's surrounded by coral and sand. So any island that's surrounded by coral and sand is not really referred to as an island. It's more like it's an atoll. And this one certainly qualifies. It's surrounded by a coral reef. This horseshoe-shaped reef is about 680 acres. It consists of about 50 small islands or their islets. It's 5 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. If you could walk around the coastline, which you can't do, it's 12 miles. The largest island is Cooper Island, which is where I went. It's 1.5 miles long, 1/2 mile wide, and its signature asset is a 5,000-foot runway, which makes it really wonderful to be able to fly in there. The atoll encloses 3 lagoons with an average depth of about 140 feet. It has an interesting description. It's one of the most spectacular marine wildernesses on Earth, and the reason for that is very simple. Nobody's ever colonized there. Nobody's ever lived there. The exception is during World War II. We'll talk about that a little bit. It has major fish, major abundance of different fish, forests and birds in there. It's a major bird sanctuary. There's millions of birds. The 3 most common are sooty terns, boobies, and frigates. It has a huge crab population. It's the breeding ground for several different species of sharks. And as you'll see from some of the photos, it's just got some amazing foliage. Palm trees, coconut trees, mangrove bushes, ferns, and so forth. Has a lot of rainfall. It's 175 inches of rain per year. We expected that. And we also expected a hot, humid equatorial type climate. Interior is considered to be a dense vegetation and kind of thickened jungle in many places. It was named after Captain Sully, whose ship became shipwrecked on a nearby reef back in 1802. The King of Hawaii annexed it to Hawaii in 1862. And then the United States annexed Hawaii and Palmyra into the US in 1898. And somehow a judge in 1911 got permission to buy Palmyra Island, Judge Henry Cooper. He kept it for 11 years and then sold it to the Fuller Leo family of Hawaii, who began a coconut harvesting business. And that went on for about 25 years or so until the US Navy said, we need to step in. We need to set up a naval air station here. And we're going to primarily use it as a refueling station. But thank you for letting us move in. And they did. And they moved in 2,500 personnel. They have a small library on Palmyra. And I was able to find this map and a fold-out map, which I did. You can take a look at it. And in the lower left corner, you can see that pretty much the Navy leveled the place. Most of the vegetation was gone. They put in extra runways and airstrips. They built to put in 200 buildings. And you can see the radio communication team. This was dated in 1944, June 30th, for the status of the Naval Air Station. After the war, the Fuller Leo family continued their coconut harvesting business until 2000, and then they decided to sell Palmyra Atoll to the Nature Conservancy for $30 million, and a year later, TNC sold half of the atoll to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but they kept Cooper Island for research. And today, Cooper Island, through the Palmyra Atoll Research Consortium, PARC, is a major center, a research center, and researchers from all over the world, from universities, museums, and different conservation organizations come there to study climate change, the coral reefs, and so forth. 4 years later, in 2009, the U.S. established the new Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument. And this basically consists of the islands that you see here: Wake, Johnston, Kingman Reef, Palmyra, Jarvis, Holland, and Baker. So as we started to do some background reading about this place, Palmyra really has gotten a bad rap over the years, and we just wondered why. I started reading articles and I saw adjectives like haunted, it's evil, it's strange, it's cursed, it's unfriendly. And some people have written that it's a paranormal paradise. Another description I saw was it's a land of mystery, intrigue, and violence. And I think my personal favorite was it's a postcard paradise with a dangerous heart. What the heck is going on here? So yes, there were some documented accidents and let's say disasters that have occurred. It's typical for islands out that way where there are a lot of boats and ships that disappear, that are shipwrecked through the reefs there. 1816, a Spanish pirate ship was purportedly smashed on the reef and had some treasure, and the treasure is people still think that there's buried treasure on Palmyra. It's a lot of anecdotal stuff and a lot of tales. But one thing that was true is that the sailors who were stationed there during World War II just really complained about having some psychological problems with this island, overwhelming feelings of dread and fear, tremendous sense of doom. Not sure exactly what was driving all of that, other than they might have been homesick, but there's a lot of reports about this. But I wanted to look at something a little more tangible, and I actually found some curses about Palmyra. This is a true story. On July 9th, 1947, a C-46 cargo plane crashed, and unfortunately a 19-year-old radioman was seriously injured. Fortunately, the CAA was able to make contact with the ham radio operator in New Jersey, contacted a local surgeon who was able to give instructions to the wife of a mechanic on the island that was able to administer some blood transfusions. And then the next day or so, the radio man was airlifted back to Hawaii and apparently survived. So, but that was an unfortunate accident. But one that's a lot more famous is something called the Sea Wind Murders that took place in 1974. So I'll introduce you to first the bad guys in this story, Buck Walker and Stephanie Stearns. Buck was a drug dealer in California. He had served time in San Quentin for armed robbery, but moved to Hawaii and became aware that there was about ready to be some new charges levied at him from a sting operation. So he stole a boat called the Iola, and together with his girlfriend Stephanie and their dog set sail for Palmyra on June 1st. Normally that's a 2-week trip, but they really didn't know what they were doing. It took them a lot longer, and they wound up getting there on June 27th, but they couldn't get through the coral reef to the lagoon. So they set up camp in an abandoned bunker and started to grow marijuana plants, but they became pretty desperate, living off the coconuts and stuck anchored outside the lagoon. Here are the good guys in the story, Mac and Eleanor Muff Graham. These were expert sailors for San Diego. They'd already gone around the world in their 38-foot Seawind yacht. They were in Hawaii preparing for their next adventure, and on 24th of June, they set sail for Palmyra because they were planning to stay there for 2 years. They got there on July 2nd, and they arrived 5 days after Buck and Stephanie. They kept in weekly contact with a ham radio friend, even though they didn't have a license, but they did have a Yaesu transceiver on board their ship. And their friend Curtis quickly learned that the two couples there were not getting along very well at all. In fact, the last conversation that he had with Mac or Muff was on August 28th. He never heard from them again. 2 months later, Buck and Stephanie sailed into Honolulu, not on their boat, but on the Seawind, all by themselves. The boat had been repainted, had a new nameplate, but there were a lot of friends of Mac and Muff who recognized the boat right away. And their story, of course, was that the Grahams had gone fishing and drowned, basically. And so they decided to take over the boat since their boat was no longer seaworthy. Well, the cops didn't believe that story. They were both arrested, convicted of boat theft in 1974. Stephanie got 2 years, served 7 months. Buck got 10 years, but somehow escaped from a prison after 42 months. And that really would have been the end of the story, except for this South African couple who was vacationing on Palmyra 7 years later. And while they were walking down the beach during low tide, a metal chest washed up on the beach. When they opened it up, they found it was a human skull with a bullet hole in it, human bones, a gold tooth, and a women's watch. And through dental records, Muff Graham was identified. She had been dead for 7 years. Her husband's remains have never been found. Sharon Jordan wrote a book about her travels around the world, including this event, which of course you can buy for $20 on Amazon. Well, Buck and Stephanie were caught in Arizona. They were arrested, charged with first-degree murder, and then tried separately. The murder trial moved from Hawaii to San Francisco, and in 1985, Buck was found guilty. He spent 22 years in prison, got out in 2007, died a few years later. While he was in jail, he wrote his own account of this called The True Story of an Island Tragedy, which most reviewers think is a pitiful pot full of lies. And of course, you can buy it for $27 at Amazon, and if it's 733 pages, it might make a good paperweight. Well, what about his girlfriend, Stephanie? Well, she came from a fairly wealthy family in San Diego. So they were able to hire Vince Bugliosi, who was a prosecutor of Charles Manson. And basically she got off because she claimed she didn't know what was going on, had a convincing story, and so she didn't serve any time at all. Vince Bugliosi collected his own notes about this whole event, decided to publish a book, which he did, became a #1 bestseller. It was called And the Sea Will Tell. And you can buy that for $20 on Amazon. He sold the rights to this book to Columbia Pictures, and it was made into a movie, 1991, And the Sea Will Tell, starring Rachel Ward and James Brolin and Richard Crenna. You can stream it from someplace. I think it's on Amazon Prime. I'm not sure. It's really true to form. They actually shot some of the scenes in Palmyra. It follows the book and it follows the whole story of this pretty closely. Well, that was a documented kind of a curse, and then not to be left alone, there was another one that took place in 1980. This is a 6-day DXpdetion. This distinguished neurosurgeon, Dave Gardner from LA, put together a team of 7 operators, and they flew out of Honolulu on January 5th during a rainstorm. They weren't able to negotiate the runway, so the plane was completely destroyed. Unfortunately, one of the passengers suffered a spinal fracture, so she was evacuated by the U.S. Coast Guard in 24 hours and had to leave. The other members stayed on to operate from Palmyra and Kingman Reef. But on January 10th, the team leader lacerated his hand, and being a neurosurgeon, the team voted to leave, so they did. And on January 11th, the entire team left Palmyra on a Coast Guard C-130 to go back to Hawaii. But they did make 15,000 contacts, and if you were one of the lucky guys that got a confirmation from them, you would have got this unusual QSL card, which actually shows the plane, on the runway crash there, and the confirmation. So it's actually a collector's item. Well, all right. So at this point, you're probably asking yourself the question, well, why would any ham radio operator want to go to Palmyra Atoll after reading all this stuff? Well, there's a very good reason. In 2015, we were planning this whole trip. It was ranked #9 out of 340 DXCC entities. It was the most wanted, second most wanted in Europe. And the reason is very simple. Well, last time there was any kind of organized DXpedition to Palmyra was in 2005, which was 10 years earlier. So we knew that there'd be a big demand if we could get permission to go, and that's the secret to all of these DXpeditions, is getting permission to go. And in this particular case, we had to get permission from both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Nature Conservancy, because they had dual responsibility for overseeing Palmyra. And when you start to walk down this path, you run into these kind of brick walls. These are the kind of reasons that you get no. You'll hear that it's just too hard to get there, or it's politically remote. North Korea is a perfect example. Or it's environmentally remote, which means it's a national wildlife and they're very sensitive about that. Or it's going to cost too much money to get to the Antarctic. Or when you get there, you may not even be able to land. That certainly happened to the guys who went to try to go to Bouvet 2 years ago. Or it may be just bad timing, which means that nobody's around to even evaluate your request or approve it. And by the way, in most cases, you have to take somebody with you from one of these organizations to make sure that you follow the rules. And if there's no support person available, then it just may not work out. Well, our 2 team leaders for this trip, Lou, N2TU, and Craig, K9CT, they persevered. They went through this process, the application process. It took a long time, but they finally got a very the coveted special use permit, which gives us permission to go there. It was issued in January 2015. They set a target date for a visit of a year later. They said you can stay for 14 days, but you can only stay on Cooper Island. We don't want you to interfere with the birds or any other wildlife and make any other kind of negative environmental impact. Don't embarrass yourself by bringing any weapons or drugs. Gambling is not allowed. And you can only use vertical antennas because we got a lot of birds and we don't want them to hurt themselves on Yaggies. There's a runway there. It's not the best, but you can fly in, and we'll charter a jet, but it can only take 9 operators. And if you'd like to reserve your spot on the chart, please send us a $60,000 non-refundable deposit, which we did. At that point, the team started coming together. and the expedition teams always consist of 3 groups. There's the group that's actually going to go on the island and operate. There's a behind the scenes team that's involved in logistics and planning and fundraising and so forth. And then when we're live on the island, there's an off-island pilot team that's communicating with us in real time to give us feedback about how we're doing, making sure that we're focusing on the right bands, that the propagation is, we're taking advantage of that and so forth. And this is a typical makeup of any DXpdetion team to any major location. The team itself, and I was honored to be part of this team, was a great group of operators. We had been on different trips together, so we were familiar with each other. We had built a high level of trust. We all have, I think you could call it a good work ethic. We were used to operating pilots, through high rates from contesting and other experiences. And we also spoke 3 languages, the language of CW, sideband, and digital. And that's what almost all the expedition operators bring to the party, be able to operate flexible, to be able to operate different modes at different times. And then everyone on the team has a special skill that they bring. There are those guys that love to build antennas, others who are excellent at logistics planning, still others who are really excellent at some of the technical aspects of it, and those who like to build antennas. And so those sub activities were divided among the team. And then there are 2 requirements that I always mention that it's really important for a trip like this. One, you got to leave your ego in the parking lot for obvious reasons, and you just certainly don't want to forget to bring your sense of humor with you. The normal weight for this type of operation is like 1,600 to 1,800 pounds, and we knew we couldn't bring it all on the plane. But we found out that there was a resupply barge that left Honolulu twice a month, and we got permission to use the barge for some of our stuff. Well, we put the big, heavy, bulky stuff on the barge. We gathered our antennas and coax cables and paddles and headsets and rebar and tools and all that stuff. And we're able to package it up, but we could not use cardboard or wood. Neither is permitted on Palmyra. So everything had to be packed in plastic containers. We bought some hard-sided ski carriers or these bazooka type shipping tubes. That's what was targeted for the barge. And then we brought with us on the charter jet, the radios, the amps, and the laptops are all packed in heavy duty Pelican cases. So every DXpedition, the secret to it all is planning ahead of time, which means the best thing you can do, the biggest favor you can do for yourself is get all the equipment that you're going to use, unpack it, test it, make sure it works, label it, repack it, and make sure that when you get to your destination, you know exactly what to do, how to take everything out, put it together, and don't waste time wondering about, where the assembly instructions are for these things. So that was done for these antennas. We used stepper antennas. There was another 2 or 3 guys that went out to get a lot of extra equipment that we knew we couldn't buy on Palmyra. There's no Radio Shack or Home Depot there, so if you either bring it or you're out of luck. So we had 3 containers of extra supplies, and then probably the toughest job was getting all the radios, the amplifiers, and the laptops set up, tested, and then packed in Pelican cases. Now, we were very lucky because we had a contact in Honolulu, Kimo Chunnis's call sign K6MM, and he said, look, if you guys ship everything out to me, I'll store it at my home, and then when the barge is leaving from Honolulu, I'll bring it down there and put it on the barge for you guys to go over to Palmyra. So he was a great asset to have. I built the website and put that up and got a couple other things going, including designing the little logo shirt patch that we have there. And we started our fundraising and got ready to go. Now, to get ready to go, in this case, we only needed 1 immunization shot, and that was tetanus. But we also needed our own personal medical evacuation insurance. Everybody that goes on a trip like this has to have medical evacuation insurance. That is to say, if something happens, somebody needs to come and get you and take you home. So we all had our own, very comprehensive medical evacuation insurance plan. Fortunately, we never had to use that. Personal belongings are limited to 40 pounds because of the weight restrictions. And this is another biohazard that U.S. Fish and Wildlife has. You're going to go to one of their places, you must have all your clothes frozen for 48 hours before leaving. And this is where it's helpful to have an understanding significant other when she opens the freezer and sees your underwear in there, wonders what the hell's that doing in there. But I'm not kidding. They're very strict about this and the 20-page guideline that they put together. They just basically are trying to do everything to minimize you bringing stuff onto the island that's going to hurt the environment. All right, so we about time to leave. We all flew to Honolulu on January 9th, 2016, and the next day we had our first breakfast together, and this is the team of operators. Really great group of guys. Honored to be with them. And we, of course, after breakfast, sat down and talked about what we were hoping to accomplish. Number one on the list, don't screw up. We've been given this rare opportunity to go to a place. We want to make sure we understand what the rules and the guidelines are and obey those. And we went over those in great detail. We talked about how the teams are going to get there and set up our antennas and stations to get on the air as soon as we could. We want to talk a lot about propagation and focusing especially on the international effort, especially Europe, because it's very difficult for Europe to work that part of the world. Talked about the 3 modes we were going to operate. And we figured if we had good propagation weather, if Murphy didn't visit us too many times, we had at least 3 stations on the air, and there weren't any other major surprises, we should be able to make 60,000 contacts in the time we were there. And of course, you wanted to make sure we have a safe, fun trip. That night, we sat down for dinner with some of the folks from TNC, the Nature Conservancy, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They gave us some tips and ideas about how to do different things there because they'd been there several times themselves. And then they wished us good luck, and we said, we'll see you out at the airport tomorrow morning. So that night, had our good night's sleep, got up the next day, got our luggage, got on our little shuttle bus, and we went over to Landmark Aviation to get on our charter jet. And as soon as we got there, we saw this expression on Deborah's face, who was our host, and she said, oh my God, I had no idea that you guys are bringing so much crap with you. She said, let's go talk to the pilot. Pilot said, you know what, we can take all your Pelican cases and equipment, but your personal luggage is not going to fit because we just have this Falcon 50 charter jet. So what we'd like you to do is repack all your personal belongings into some small plastic carry-on bags. At a time like that, there are only 2 words that come to mind: no problem. So we went into the hangar and we took our suitcases and ripped them open, and Deborah came around with these plastic bags and she said, John, you don't need 6 t-shirts, you only need 2. Take those. And you don't need all that underwear, take 3. And then basically in about 15 minutes, we had repacked all the stuff we really needed into these plastic bags, and we were ready to go. So we got on the plane, and that's the pilot in the upper left corner and his son, who's the co-pilot. And if you look, you can see how we kind of squeezed those plastic bags everywhere. There's no vacant spot was unoccupied. We had our stuff. We were able to get on everything we needed on. We were really excited at this point, and we took off, and then we're on our way to Palmyra. And as we were on our way, we're talking about this, we knew that Palmyra is only 35 miles from a place called Kingman Reef, which is a very rare DXCC entity. And so we asked them, we said to the pilot, you know, it's on the way. Would you mind if you turn left or right a little bit, take a little tiny detour? We'd love if you could swing by Kingman Reef. And he said, no problem. And so that's what he did. And we swung over Kingman Reef. And you could see that this is what it looks like at low tide. You can imagine what it was like at high tide. It's basically underwater today. A few months after our trip, this was deleted from the DXCC list altogether, dropped the number of DXCC entities from 340 to 339. So if you've worked Kingman Reef, it's on the deleted list. It doesn't look like that's going to come back anytime soon. You hear that? Okay. to the left, you'll see a wind tunnel there, that green thing. Talk about that in a little bit.
Good air brakes.
See, the runway isn't the best, but it's there. We were really happy.
All
right. All right. Let's see. Hold on one second. I got it. Okay. I think I'm okay. So we were really surprised. The TNC staff came out there. There were only 6 guys on the staff there. They literally rolled out the red carpet, as you can see. They came out to see us, shook our hands, and we looked at each other and thought, how much trouble? And they looked at us, I think, and thought to themselves, who are these guys and how much trouble are they going to give us? But there they are. These are the 6 gentlemen that we got to know for 2 weeks. Really amazingly talented guys. They can fix anything. There's electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, biologist. They do double duty. They're all also great chefs. And we had a wonderful time. One of them actually put his headphones on and started making RITI contacts the last day we were there. We're hoping that he got his license, we're hoping. Anyway, there's that's the main gate for Palmyra International Airport. And what was interesting about our arrival is that there were only 6 guys there until we showed up. And we more than doubled the population. So we had to change the total population sign from 6 to 15. And we were happy to do that, actually. They were happy to have us there. And they said, okay, follow us. So we're going to go from to follow the red line from the runway to what's called the galley. And as we walk through this, you'll get your first view of this horrible place called Palmyra. Actually, it's quite a gorgeous place. You can see the heavy vegetation. There's a lot of ferns, a lot of trees. They have pinyon trees and mangrove bushes and all kinds of things. And as we're walking along, we can see these little green cabins. And we knew that we were probably going to get to stay in one of them. Every one of the cabins has a little turtle on the side with the cabin number. You can see that's cabin number 4. And as we walked along, we got a glimpse of the boathouse over there on the left. And we came through this clearing. And before we know it, we're standing outside the galley. Notice the solar panels on top of the roof. So if you step inside the galley, you find that it's really 2 rooms. The kitchen is enormous, and you can eat off the floor in the kitchen. It's absolutely amazing. The other room is their dining and meeting area. And of course, we were invited to come in and sit down in the dining and meeting area to have an orientation because we're new to the island. And Perry Barber, the station manager at the time, said, let's just have a chat. It's real simple. Let's take a look at this map. See that thing outlined in black? Well, that's where we are. It's called Cooper Island. That's where you are. We're kind of where that camp location arrow is. You get to run all over the place on Cooper Island because that's where you have permission to go. You can do, we'll talk about that in more detail, but where you're not allowed to go is any place else on Palmyra. Those purple areas are wildlife habitat areas that are overseen by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. There are a lot of the bird populations and migration patterns are over there, and you don't have permission to go there. So, just want to let you know that. Just stay on Cooper Island and you're going to be just fine. But we also want to let you know that if you go out at night, we want you to carry a flashlight. You can put one on your head, carry one in your hand. We don't want you crushing crabs. There are a lot of crabs out here. And we also want to let you know that we have a strict meal schedule. We have breakfast every day at 7, lunch at 12, and dinner at 6:30. So, keep that in mind as you're having your operating shifts, etc. But we also are going to invite you to pitch in, because anybody that comes here pitches in. So after breakfast, we expect that you're going to help us clean, polish, sweep, and mop the showers and the toilets. And after dinner, we hope that you'll be able to clean, polish, and sweep and mop the kitchen. And then once during the time you're here, this place is loaded with leaves. We just need to do a big leaf raking party for about an hour, and that's about all. And we said, no problem, our favorite 2 words. All right, they said, let's get you situated in your cabin. Those little blue squares are the cabins. There's 16 of them with 2 beds in each, so capacity is 32 people. Because we were the only ones there, we each had the luxury of getting our own cabin. So this is, DXpeditions, we're usually sleeping in a tent someplace. But this was my little piece of the world, my little cabin, number 9. And you walk in, there's a bed on the left, a bed on the right. In the middle, there's a clothes closet. There was a refrigerator, there was a utility stand, and the thing that really saved our butt, and we didn't expect them, were the circulating air fans. These are really fantastic, and because it's hot and humid there, that made all the difference in the world. And we moved right in. We were just so happy. And then we walked around to see some of the other buildings. Of course, Building 38 was one of our favorites because there are 3 flushable toilets. I mean, 4, I guess. Another luxury on the DXpedition. Normally we're digging a hole someplace, but this again, fantastic facility, and the laundry and showers really blew us away. If we didn't quite understand that we would have access to this, or we would originally not have brought as many clothes with us. But that's what we learned in Honolulu before we left, that we would have access to the laundry and the showers, and that made a big difference. We could use the washer and dryer. And again, you could eat off the floor in these places. They're kept absolutely spotless. We understand why. Their work ethic is tremendous. Well, after we got refreshed and got oriented to these other buildings, we took a walk out to where the shack was going to be. And this is the road. This is kind of walking out to the shack. It's not very far. It's less than a quarter of a mile. And when you get out there, and you step back, you'll see 2 buildings. A building on the left is a garage workshop, and that inside there, there's a bulldozer, there's a steamroller, there are trucks, there's a forklift, there's a full machine shop. It was an amazing set of tools and supplies for that whole island or area. And then on the right is the science lab, and that's the place where the visiting scientists come to spend 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 2 months at a time doing their research. And that's the place we were allowed to use. But before we walked through the door, we sat down and said, okay, the most important decision for us is, where can we put up our antennas? And they said, well, here's the good news. You can put up your antennas just about anywhere you want. We'll even help you. So we mapped it out, and we wound up using the front yard over near the West Lagoon for 2 verticals. There were 2 steppers that could run 10 to 80 meters. And then in the backyard, we put up a 3rd. So basically we put up 3 steppers. We also had a 160 meter antenna. It's called a Battle Creek Special. It's huge. It takes 5 people to put it up, dedicated mostly to 160 meters. And we wanted to have good capability. We had a 6 meter antenna, and we cheated. That was our only Yagi. We explained that we were going to put pink flags all over it so the birds wouldn't bother it. And they said, okay, that's fine. And we had a couple of other special antennas. The switchable vertical dipole array was set for 20 meters pointed toward Europe the whole time. We also had an 80 meter helically wound vertical that we put up. And then we had something called a shared apex loop array, which has helped us a lot on the low bands. So we were really excited to be able to have this amount of geography to do this. And so we set to work putting up all the antennas as soon as we could. And all that pre-testing and preparation paid off back in the US, because we could take things out of the cases and walk over and stick them in the ground. We knew exactly how to put things together. And we're using all the radials for the verticals, and even dropping some of them into the salt water right there in the lagoon. Vertical antennas near the beach or near salt water, they work really, really well. Before you know it, we had our antenna farm put up in the front yard. Right close to you is the stepper east. If you look straight back, there's the stepper west. There's the 80-meter vertical back there. There's that 160-meter Battle Creek Special in the middle, the 6-meter Yagi to the right. And then in the backyard, we had these other 2 antennas. We were really happy. And while the antenna guys are out doing that, another part of the team was setting up the radios. They said, all you need to do is walk through that door over there on the left. It says entrance. And this is the Palmyra Atoll Research Consortium. We took a look at those letters, PARC, and we said, geez, would you mind if we just redefine this to be the Palmyra Amateur Radio Club for the next 2 weeks? And they said, oh, okay, that's fine. You can do that. So we'll call it PARC, P-A-R-C. And now we walked through that door and we just about fell down. Look at this place. It was immaculate. And they just really are very careful about the facilities that they have, maintaining them, especially for the research people who come here. And they said, well, you can use this place any way you want. It's yours, basically, for the time that you're going to be here. We don't really know exactly what you're doing, but we think we do. But, you know, have at it, basically. And we said, gee, you guys are amazing. And within hours, we converted it into our shack. We had the radio set up. We had 5 stations set up. We had, you know, all of our banners set up and so forth. And the headphones are hanging from the ceiling because we use these Radio Sport headphones. And you can see the assignments for the station 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One was primarily on 20 meters using this switchable vertical dipole array, and also stepper west, we'll call it, and so forth. There was one station, number 5, we put on a 6-meter beacon for 10 days. We tried, that's the one that was hooked up to the 6-meter Yagi. We couldn't work anybody. But we also used that laptop to upload our logs daily to Club Log so people would know that they were in a log. And that's the way you convince people not to work you a second time when they don't need to. Our goal is to try to get as many different contacts in the log as possible and avoid the dupes. But we were really thrilled. We had the facility. We used about 2,400 feet of coax that came in from the outside through the window, came inside the shack, and then the coax cables were distributed to the stations that they belong to. This is one of the stations, and this is a typical setup. And an L-Craft K3 and the KPA 500, that's a marriage made in heaven because those two work together beautifully well. The KPA 500 does not need 220, it's 120 volts. Ergonomically, you can move them around. They're lightweight, they're easy to ship, and they talk to each other. It's one of the reasons the K3 KPA 500 combination is probably one of the most popular combinations for DXpeditions because they're easy. As I said, they just work well together. And with 500 watts and good antennas, you can work the world. We also had the P3 in between them. We had, in this case, we just popped a laptop on top of the K3 and the P3. We used a wireless keyboard and mouse. If you notice, the stepper controllers are up on the shelf so that when you're operating that, you can just dial up the whatever band you're going to operate. We use Samlex power supplies. And of course, every station has the bandpass filter that you need for the whatever band you're going to be operating. That was basically our setup. We had 5 of those stations, and they were all networked together. Now, because we were very efficient at getting our equipment out of the box and on the air, we had our first contact in just hours, basically, after we arrived on January 12th. The first contact was J3EA on 30 meters CW. So we were really happy, and the team was off and running. We had 9 guys, so they were divided into 3 teams. Mike, Hal, and Craig on 1, Bill, Glenn, and Tom on 2, and I was on with Lou and Jerry. And we just had our assignments. We knew exactly when we were going to operate, when we were going to sleep, when we were going to eat, and so forth. And we were thrilled about get on the air and get some good call signs in the log. And that's probably the most important point of any DXpedition operation. It doesn't do us any good if we bust your call. It doesn't do us any good if we're working a pileup and we're not quite sure what the last letter of your call sign is. So we're just really insistent about making sure that we have the correct call sign in the log. And what's interesting on DXpedition is that as soon as you put your headphones on, things change, because in the United States, all call signs begin with Alpha, Kilo, November, or Whiskey. But when you put your headphones on, you're going to enter the prefix Twilight Zone. And this is especially true on sideband, which is much more complicated than CW because of the fact that you're listening to different dialects coming through your head, through your headset. CW is music to everybody's ears because it's CW. But as soon as you start going over to sideband, things slow down because you have to ask for repeats. There's a lot of interruptions. There's a lot of QRMing. Just as a side note, good contest operators make good DXpdetion operators. And if you're a really good CW operator, you're even better because you can operate pilots faster. And so I often say, some guys will say, how do I get to go on a DXpdetion? Well, make sure that you're comfortable putting your headphones on and operating in the prefix Twilight Zone, and you'll be good. So our strategy was simple. We wanted to have 3 stations always on the air, and then the 4th or 5th could be occupied by somebody who was not assigned to that that time slot, but didn't feel like going to sleep, or didn't want to wander, or didn't want to eat. So often the 4th station was on the air by somebody who volunteered to be on it. We followed the gray line map continuously. We had contact through email through our off-island pilot team, making sure that we were leveraging good propagation for all the world. And we did want to focus heavily on Europe. So that was kind of our strategy going in. As again, Europe is difficult to work because you have to go over the pole to get there. It's always hard in that part of the Pacific for Europe to, to get through. And we always had some fun shots, of course, to show. This is Mike, who got all excited because he heard somebody from Zone 14. And then when I said you have to bring your sense of humor, I meant it, because somebody always has a camera at the wrong time. And yes, Jerry and I were not actually praying for more openings here. We're taking a quick doze because it was we had a light night, which the bands were not open, and so I think we both kind of dozed off for a little bit. Now, when any DXpdetion starts, you have to manage your time very carefully. First, you don't want to miss a shift. Secondly, you can operate a spare station if you want to, but you also have to make sure that you eat and sleep, and you're going to always probably have to fix something. And in this particular case here on Palmyra, we had these camp chores we had to take care of. Then what's left over is time you get to wander around and maybe take a look, do a little sightseeing. All of this takes a lot of discipline. We had no idea what to expect as far as food. Alex, who is a multi-talented individual, also happens to be a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America. He's our CIA agent. And oh my gosh, the stuff that he prepared for us. You can see how clean this kitchen looked. He had a walk-in refrigerator and freezer. And he had wonderful breakfasts. We had scrambled eggs, and we had omelets, and we had all kinds of bacon and things. For lunch, we had a bunch of different salads to pick from. For dinner, it was either a spaghetti dinner or some seafood. And this was a chance for us. We didn't expect this. We had no idea that it was going to be this good. But the best part of all of this was it gave us a chance to sit down with the staff and get to know them during our downtime where we were eating. And I'll just relay one. There's many stories, but this one in particular. One of the team members on our operators is Dr. Glenn Johnson, W0GJ. You may have heard of him. He's an orthopedic surgeon, very, very famous DXpeditioner, just a great guy. He sat down to have breakfast with Ben Buckwall, one of the 6 members on the team there on Palmyra, and they started talking about where are you from, where I'm from. Well, it turns out they found out they were both from a little town in Iowa called Marshalltown, Iowa. Well, that was interesting enough. And that night, Glenn Johnson got on the satellite phone with his wife, Vivian, and said, "You're not going to believe it. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I just met Ben Buckwall. They're both from the same town." And she said, "What was that name again?" He said, "Ben Buckwall." She said, "I know Ben Buckwall. I know his mother. In fact, I used to babysit for him when he was a young boy." And here you are in the middle of nowhere, and Glenn met somebody that his wife used to babysit for years and years ago. It was just one of those serendipitous moments that you just don't forget. I mentioned rake day, where we had to give up a day to go rake leaves. Well, we did that. And we also got pretty good with the mop on the floor. We were mopping like crazy. We actually enjoyed this. We were proud to be able to keep the place shining and work at their level. They really, they weren't kidding about that. Well, the other thing I mentioned is that if you're lucky, and we were lucky in this place, we were given permission to wander. We could go around and see things, and we just had to be careful where we went. Sometimes we went in groups of 2 or 3. Sometimes we just went by ourselves. Every morning, as we came out of the galley after breakfast or whenever we came out, the mascot was there. He's a red-footed booby, and his name is Rain, spelled R-A-Y-N. And Rain would greet us every day.
Going.
There you go.
There we go.
Feels good.
Come on, buddy.
Yeah.
Give us some more show. That's it.
Rain loved to, as you can tell,
today? Huh?
as you can tell, Rain loved to hop on your shoulder and up on your arm. And I was blown away. I designed this little patch, this shirt patch that I'm wearing, and I put a red-footed booby on a Morse code key. And here I am on Palmyra, and I have a red-footed booby on my arm. It was one of those moments again. It's like one of those unforgettable moments. So just kind of walking around, this is what you see. There's a lot of strange signs that are there that have withstood the test of time and weather. Some of them are pretty funny. This is one of the more spectacular sights. This place is just unbelievably gorgeous during the day or night, especially during the sunsets and so forth. There are also, though, some grim reminders of the past. And this is true of every island out in the Pacific. There are these bunkers, and if you go to a place like Wake Island, where I've been, it's even more dramatic. These are islands that are partly frozen in time. It's as if people walked away, back 70 years ago, and there they are. They're overgrown. They're there, and nobody's maintaining them. But you'll find these sort of reminders of the past on all of these islands out in the Pacific. And this is what it looked like on Palmyra. But there are also some beautiful spots like this swimming hole. We didn't have time to jump in the water there, but we saw the staff meter. And one of the things you notice, and it's the only sound you hear, is the wind. It's a constant wind blowing those coconut palms, and it's really a powerful something to be harnessed, actually. They said, in your spare time, we don't, have a lot, but we'll be happy to take you out for a boat ride if you like. You can't take the boats out yourself, but we'll take you wherever you want to go. And so we said, sure, we'll just get out there. And we went out to the outer islands. We drove by them. We're not allowed to go to those places. This is a reverse look back at the shack where we were operating. So that's what Palmyra, that's where we were. And we went out one day snorkeling. They said, well, we got some great snorkeling equipment. You can use it. This is probably this is a snorkeler's paradise out here. Some of the guys are avid on our team. We're avid snorkelers. And it was a windy day, but took a lot of great photographs, which we shared. And it's one nice thing about the expedition teams. We share all of our photos and movies, all the media. So that's Tom Burst and ND2T getting back in. We want to make sure that everybody has, all of the photographs and movies for the future, because you never know what you're going to miss. Everybody in their private time took a walk out to North Beach, and this is the direction. There's signs for North Beach. You go out this way, you go through this path, and you can see the dense foliage, what it's like. It's more than hip high at this point. And eventually you'll hit a clearing and you come out, and that red line that you see is, I'm going to swing the camera from the left to the right. And this is the place where the metal chest washed up, that South African couple that was walking on the beach in Muff Graham's remains. This is where they washed up on the beach out there. By the way, it's only about 1.5 feet deep out to the breakers. You can walk out there, and one of the guys on the staff was a biologist, and he used to go out there once or twice a week to collect samples for isotopes and other things. And we actually walked out as well. You can walk all the way out to the breakers. And as you swing around more toward the to the right there, you'll see how the island curves around, and you can actually walk all the way around the island. And if you do that, you come back around on the runway, up at the north end of the runway. Makes it made for a nice walk to get some exercise while we were there. I mentioned that this place is the breeding grounds for a number of different sharks. So these black-tip sharks, they came right up to us, walking around. They were very curious. Didn't bother us at all, of course, but they were just more curious than anything else. They were there. And the birds were everywhere. They're not used to seeing a lot of people on this island, so they, especially these beautiful fairy terns, they would come down, kind of sit above your shoulder, and then as you turn around to look at them, they say, "Okay, I think I'm taking off," and then they would take off. So, but we got along with the birds. We didn't have any problems. Then we treated them with respect, and they didn't bother us at all. We saw some other interesting things there, as you always do on a trip like this. And this is the reason that you want to wear bring your flashlight at night, because these coconut crabs are huge, and you don't want to accidentally step on one of these, because they'll probably win. You're going to feel it on your big toe if you're not careful. These guys are very, very strong. Now, if you wonder what happened to all the leftovers, well, they're brought over to Crab Town for some really fine dining. Nothing goes to waste on Palmyra. At 9 or 10 at night, if you go out to the boathouse and turn on the light and wait about 15 to 20 minutes, a school of manta rays will come in. And at first we thought, oh, gee. And the guys there said, look, if you're brave enough to stand in the water, they'll come up to you and they'll take their fin and they'll just brush it against your leg. So that's what we did. And I have this one, I actually put a little soundtrack on it because that's kind of what I was thinking of when this one came over. These are some of the most graceful animals I've ever seen. He would just come right around and just gently touch your leg with his flipper. So it's really cool. Yep, there were some spiders. I think one or two guys got a little spider bite. Nothing major. These guys are big and you can see them. If you're wondering about power, yes, they do have a lot of solar panels there. I don't know how many now, but at the time there were over 150, and they would charge this bank of batteries. These batteries would feed these inverters to produce 120 and 240 volts. And then at night, as the batteries started to drain down, the diesel generators would turn on for 2 to 4 hours to recharge the batteries, especially if they drop below 80% capacity. But the plan was to start harnessing the wind. They put this wind turbine in, and the idea was to replace the generators altogether to keep the batteries fully charged to help reduce their carbon footprint. I think that's online now. Remember the ill-fated DXpdetion that lasted 6 days? This is the Lockheed Lodestar. Well, there it is. It's still there today. Yeah, these are photographs I took. Of course, on the fuselage are the call signs now of all the guys who went on the trip. They're all scratched in there, but they just didn't bother removing it. It's just kind of sitting there nestling off the runway, just sort of as a grim reminder again. Now, one day, one of the staff members said, if you want to follow me into the jungle area over here, because you're never going to find this place, I'll show you Buck Walker's cabin. This is Buck Walker, Mr. Bad Guy, where he and his girlfriend stayed for a while when they first got to the island. And it hasn't been torn down. It's just sitting there, tremendously overgrown. So everybody kind of went over there for a photo op in Buck Walker's cabin. We had heard that Palmyra had some legendary sunsets. It's one thing to see photographs. It's another thing to actually go there and experience this yourself. And fortunately, a couple of the guys had some really fantastic photographic equipment, and it's another hobby for some of them. We got some great photographs of this place. Just really breathtaking. Just amazing. And this one sequence, this sunset lasted, I don't know, 5 minutes or more. So we have probably 50 photos of this with this changing color panorama that you see. Yeah, just amazing. And we did have a little rain. Amazing. We didn't experience the torrential rainstorms that were reported there, reputed to have. But, you know, we had a little bit and that was fine. We had a rainbow that came out. We're fine. Again, all the planning that goes into something like this and those year-long effort, we're out there. It's amazing how fast the time goes by. We came in there on the 11th. We're on the air that night, operated the 12th through the 26th, and it was time now to pack up and leave, believe it or not. And so we had to, we did a very good job of cleaning that lab that we had the privilege of operating in, and made sure that it was spotless. We divided our gear into two piles. Pile on the left, all that stuff was going to go back to Honolulu on the barge at a future date. All the stuff on the right was going on the plane with us. Those are all the radios and amplifiers and computers. And so just a quick report card. How did we do? We said that we were going to try to shoot for 60,000 QSOs. We had a really good run. We didn't have any problems. Nobody got sick and equipment didn't fail. Murphy stayed away. So we were actually able to generate almost 80,000 contacts. That was really good. We were really happy about that. 58% were CW, 31% sideband, 11% RIDI. The money band was 20 meters. It was open most of the time somewhere. Of course, we could always work Asia or VK or ZL from there very easily. But the Japanese operators, there were plenty of them, were very kind when we said, we need you guys to hold off for a minute because there's an opening to Europe and we'll get back to you in half an hour. And they did that. They were very cooperative. The other thing we were happy about is that we put about, 2,750 QSOs in the log for 160 meters. So we really were happy about that. And 12% of our contacts were Europe. We had didn't set a specific target, but we knew that if the radios and the antennas operated the way we hoped, we could get at least 10%, and we were able to get 12%. We're very happy about that. Another way to look at the stats, we were on the air for 344 hours, which means that we averaged about 230 contacts an hour or 3.84 QSOs a minute. With 9 operators, we averaged 8,800 contacts each. If you're a statistics guy and you really want to go dig into that more, the website's still up at palmyra2016.org. You can go there and click on the statistics tab, and there's a lot more numbers there. When we left, it was ranked 9th. It's now ranked 21st. And you could say, well, geez, you were there, we made all these contacts. How come it's still 21? Why isn't it 40 or 60 or 80? Why is the demand still high? Well, if you look on that list, you're going to see a lot of places like Curie Island, Johnston, Midway, and Desiceo, for example. All of these islands, especially in North America, are in the top 20 or 25. It's because when you go on a DXpdetion, you can never satisfy all the demand. You go for 2 weeks, 10 days or 2 weeks, you make as many contacts as you can. Hopefully you're putting as many unique call signs in the log as you can, but eventually you have to leave. And so it's an opportunity for people to go back there and do this again and again. Before we left, we got to visit the Palmyra Yacht Club. So here's the Yacht Club. It's It's a pretty earthy looking place. There's a lot of graffiti on the wall, a lot of souvenirs all over the place, a lot of banners and pennants and books. And we got permission to scratch our call signs up on the beam up there, that white beam. So all of our 9 names and call signs are there. And we also brought this 3-foot by 3-foot banner with us that we signed and we autographed it. And they said, you're more than welcome to hang that in the yacht club if you like. So I assume if you go there that our banner's still hanging from the rafters. On any DXpedition like this, we always take time out to say thank you to the folks who've helped sponsor it, like Northern California DX Foundation, financially supported it. And so did Indexa, and so did especially DX Engineering. They were wonderful. This is where the group has to go through the embarrassing ritual of changing shirts over and over again. You want to make sure that you're not caught on camera when that happens. And then whenever I'm on a trip like this, I always like to flip the banner around because I know that in the future, there's another group that will probably want to say thank you to. So, it comes in handy for things like that. Thank you, Oscar. So it was time to leave. We took a group shot. There we are in front of the Lone Star in our glow in the dark t-shirts. We will never ask Craig K9CT to choose the color of a t-shirt again. It's a real collector's item. So it was time to say to get ready to leave, and our plane coming in. And Jerry, WB9Z, is a GoPro guy. He likes to wear his GoPro camera on his head. He said, I'm going to go out to the runway and watch the plane come in. And this is our ride back to Honolulu. And he stood on the runway. Thank you, Jerry, for that brave move. And so we said goodbye to our wonderful friends, the 6 guys who are on the staff there at TNC. Wished them well. We couldn't have asked for a better group of guys to partner with us on this. They made us feel really at home. Got on the plane, went to Honolulu, and this is a shot on the shuttle bus going back to the hotel, sitting across from 4 of the operators. And I looked at the expressions on their face and I thought, gee, I wonder if these guys are feeling forever cursed. Well, no, not at all. In fact, we've talked to each other many times. We'd all go back there again tomorrow. We would love to go back there again if we could get permission to. So I found this quote. I think it's appropriate. Palmyra will always belong to itself, never to man. I think that's true. I hope it kind of stays that way. Thank you guys for inviting me tonight. I really appreciate it. The chance to talk about this. It gives me a chance to relive the trip as well. It's kind of fun. Be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, John. That's been a great presentation. After we're all done here, if you could you send me your slideshow so I'll put it on we have a site to put that on. So if you'll do that, I appreciate it very much. I'll go with Barry first. You got any questions out there you see, Barry?
Nothing right now.
Okay, I don't see any hands up.
That's fine.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. Okay, Oscar's got his hand up. Take it away, Oscar.
Can you lower your screen, please?
Me? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Before I do that, I have one more slide I just wanted to let you know. Let me see if I brought it. Let's see. Okay. We just talked about Palmyra. I wanted to let you know that there are a couple of other trips that I've been on that you might be interested in. And if you enjoy this kind of journey, I'm more than happy to come back again to talk about one of these other places that I've been. Also, I know that you guys belong to your own clubs, local clubs, wherever you are in Florida or New Jersey or in wherever you are. If your local club is looking for a speaker, I'm more than happy to consider, doing that via Zoom as well. So just a little, I just wanted to mention that, and you can always reach me at my email address at k6mm@arrl.net. Okay.
Yeah, I'll make sure that's part of the presentation here, that part, and we'll add it into the text thing too, so people know about that. I'm sure that a lot of people like to take you up on that. Okay.
Oscar.
Well,
Yeah. I do have a question because you're on tropics, but you didn't look so sweat. So what was the temperature on the island during your expedition?
Yeah, it was about 75 to 80 degrees most of the time. It was really quite nice. The breezes there kept us cool. Also, that shack that I mentioned, it was air conditioned.
Oh, that makes a difference.
I know.
Poor guys.
I didn't want to tell you that ahead of time.
But we all of those trips were like that. Okay,
Right.
we do another one here. KC3B, Howard. You want to take it
Yeah,
away?
hi. Wow, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you. I had asked a question though. Where and how did the barge tie up or load and unload, given all that the shoals around there?
Do you remember the map that I showed you at the beginning? And there was the aerial view. There was an inlet on the map. If you want, I can put that.
No, I think I remember.
Yeah, it was dredged by the Navy during the war. It's a deep trench. It comes in on one side, and it's wide enough for the barge to come in, and that's how supplies are replenished to Palmyra at least twice a year, sometimes more often depending on what's going on. So they told us they volunteered when they gave us the barge schedule. They said the barge is leaving. If you want to use it, you got to get your stuff on. That set into motion our schedule for testing all the equipment and making sure it got to Honolulu in time to be transported over to the barge. That was just a wonderful gift on their side.
I'm going to talk to you via the email because I was born and raised in Syracuse, and I got my license 1 year before you did. And I was I'll go through and see if you knew some of the same people I know.
Oh, fantastic!
By the way, were there any snakes on that island? I noticed.
No, I didn't see any. There were no rats either. It was just mostly some spiders. That was about it. It was pretty clean.
Thank you again. Wonderful presentation.
You're welcome, Howard.
Yes, and I also like Howard Station behind him there. Nice station.
Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? No more hands are up.
This is Diana, KJ7GBY on the cell phone.
Hi, Diana.
Hi, John. Thank you very much. This is the second time I've heard the presentation, but the first time that I haven't gotten to see the actual slides in the video. But I tell you, just listening, I heard more details and more information than I did the first time. So it's really great. I got more information about the antennas and some of the information about planning that I had missed. So again, thank you very much. And boy, I wouldn't mind listening to this slide presentation a good number of more times. It's a really fun presentation and also a great education at the same time. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it.
And I might say here that this is being recorded. The recording will be available for everybody here and about a couple thousand people afterwards for downloading and use for clubs and just for enjoying this. So if you missed it, it'll come again. If you want to see it over and over, it'll be there. Okay, Barry, how we doing?
We're good. Chat is clear.
Okay. Well, it's been a great presentation. I will edit out where the power went out. Do you know why your power went out, or did it just go out?
Just went out. It's just amazing. And we have PG&E here who's pulling surprises on us all the time, Pacific Gas and Electric. And it's just a reminder, it just was a quick reminder that they're in control and I'm not.
Yeah.
But fortunately, it came back on real quick.
I'm glad it did. We really did not know what happened. And so anyway, we had a nice discussion about your presentation before, during that time. It was all great stuff. We were sharing amongst ourselves. Yeah. And I'll have to edit all that out. I can give you the original if you want to hear all their comments. But anyway, it was really an enjoyed presentation. We appreciate you doing this.
You're welcome.
Okay, unless we have anything else, do you see anything, Barry?
Nope. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Okay. And John, if you'll send me your slides, I'll appreciate that very much. And we'll close this out. And what's this? Wednesday, so we have another one tomorrow, Thursday, a different one. So look forward to people coming here tomorrow. Same place, same time, different place, whatever. 73s, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you very
everybody.
much. Good night.
Good night, all. 7-3.
Good night, all.
Oh,
Thanks. 7-3.
as I always say, I leave these open afterwards. So you want to come back and just visit and talk amongst yourselves, just log back into that listening meeting and carry it away. I'll leave it open for a few hours just for that. 73.